Brandon wakes up from a nightmare and gets ready for the day, listening to announcements and reading the newspaper. At the airport, two men, Kyle and Jed, wait for Jed's girlfriend Ava, who arrives unexpectedly with her family's bodyguard, Brandon. Jed is surprised to learn that Brandon is joining them on the trip. Ava apologizes to Jed and has a conversation with Brandon, mentioning the potential for violence in any situation. Ava's family, Marty and Hank, along with their granddaughter Rosa, are at the airport organizing their belongings. Marty tells Rosa that she is growing up to look like her mother. As they walk through the airport, Marty hints at a surprise destination for Rosa. Meanwhile, an airport employee notices Ava as the governor's daughter. As Rosa and Hank chat, Rosa accidentally bumps into Ava, spilling coffee on her. Ava scolds Rosa, who runs back to Hank for comfort. Feeling guilty for her reaction, Ava decides to search for Rosa's missing teddy bear. When she finds it and returns it to Rosa, the little girl's smile returns. As Ava walks over to Brandon, they reminisce about their childhood and she expresses gratitude. Later, as they continue their journey, Ava, Jed, and Kyle discuss Ava's law school and job choices. Ava explains that they are going on vacation to unwind and escape from the pressures of school, not to face an interrogation. The group continues on their trip, each with their own motivations and goals for the journey. Continuing to accompany her, even though she is already a grown-up, on the airplane, Steward Danilo greets everyone before entering. While walking inside, Brandon informs Ava that they passed their seats. However, Ava explains they'll be sitting separately as they are boarding from the rear. During takeoff, Danilo demonstrates safety procedures when Kyle mocks him. Ava scolds him and makes him stop. Later, when Kyle asks for a drink, Danilo pretends to spill it on him as revenge, leaving a satisfied smile on his face as he passes by. Meanwhile, Rosa and her grandparents playfully bond and have a great time during the flight. As they notice there aren't many passengers on the plane, Call jokingly remarks that the plane is old so no one wants to take the risk. Jed explains that not many people book flights on the chosen date. CTIS is again saying the plane's wings are fragile. Shortly after, birds enter the jet engine, causing some instability in the airplane. The staff reassured everyone, saying that everything would be okay. While Rosa is looking outside the plane, she noticed that the jet engine's slowly breaking apart. Alarmed, she quickly pointed it out to her grandmother. Panic ensued, and everyone fastened their seatbelts. Suddenly, a part of the jet engine struck one side of the plane, causing a breach. Passengers not wearing seatbelts were sucked out of the airplane due to the high pressure. Attempts to rescue some were futile as they were pulled out by the strong vacuum of pressure. A stewardess also got caught in the vacuum while trying to help a passenger. Brandon and Ava exchanged a look as the plane descended. The plane plummeted and crashed into the sea, resulting in casualties among the passengers. Brandon was hit by a small metal piece in the chest during the fall, and Call suffered a broken hand upon impact. After a while, the airplane gradually sank into the sea. The middle part of the plane filled with water, but the rear part remained above the surface. Danilo entered and asked if everyone was okay. While seated, Brandon suddenly emerged from the middle part carrying Marty and Rosa. Brandon quickly removed the small metal piece lodged in his chest. Unfortunately, Marty drowned and lost consciousness. Danilo immediately performed CPR successfully, expelling water from Marty's body and saving her life. They inquired about Hank, and Brandon sadly reported his passing. Tears flowed, and Jed was anxious, but Brandon reassured and calmed them. He suggested they stay put in the airlock for safety. Danilo mentioned that the pilot radioed before the crash so authorities would soon be aware of their situation. When Kyle heard this, he told Danilo that he had said the same thing and that they would be okay. Brandon then shut Kyle down, saying that Danilo was right in case they ran out of air inside. Brandon instructed Danilo to look for an air tank, but they were unable to find one. Marty suggested they take the oxygen tank from a man she saw among the passengers. Brandon quickly took action to retrieve the air tank and Hank's cap from Marty. As he dove underwater, a shark suddenly attacked him through a hole, biting his side. Despite the struggle, Brandon managed to escape and deliver the oxygen tank and cap to the group. He warned Ava to stay away and apologized before bidding her farewell. Ava noticed a significant hole in Brandon's side, but he told her to be strong before getting pulled back into the waters. This caused the group to retreat in fear, as Marty cried over Brandon's fate. Marty suggested they wait and plan, turning their attention to Kyle's injury. Due to the intense pain, Kyle screamed as they straightened his broken bone. Meanwhile, a rescue helicopter was deployed to find the location of the plane crash. The radio operator instructed the rescue chopper to intensify the search operation because one of the passengers was the child of a governor. After a while, Jed suggested taking action, but Ava insisted they wait for rescue to avoid ending up like Brandon. Shortly after, the airplane weakened due to water pressure, and water began to seep through. Jed recommended again that waiting for rescue was not a good idea, but the group ignored him and continued sharing stories about their departed loved ones. Some cried as they recalled memories with their loved ones. While talking, they saw the water turn bloody, realizing that sharks were eating the corpses of their loved ones above them. Rescue helicopters continued to search for them while conversing when a shark collided with them, trying to get inside. Danilo asked how much time they thought they had left, and Ava mentioned it might be around 3 to 4 hours. The plane was making buzzing sounds, but Danilo dismissed it as nothing. Jed rolled his eyes, and when Danilo noticed, he said that Jed didn't believe him because he was just a steward. Jed replied, stating that he had an engineering degree and mentioned that the airplane was significantly fragile compared to a submarine designed for underwater conditions. He asserted that at any moment, the plane could give way and water could flood in. Shortly after, the lights inside the plane went out as it continued to slip further downward. They found themselves near the edge of a seamount, with a slight movement of the plane potentially causing them to descend to the ocean floor. The airplane began to malfunction in their new position, and the plane's angle became steeper. Recognizing the dangerous situation, Ava suggested that they had no choice but to attempt swimming upward. Jed, with concern, asked how they would handle the sharks. Rosa recalled what they were taught in school about sharks and shared that sharks are afraid of bubbles. However, Jed mentioned that they wouldn't be able to ascend to the surface without air. They discussed possible solutions to their air problem, but no one could come up with a solution. Ava said she would try to think of a way to ascend and excused herself to use the restroom, where she simply cried inside while looking at a photo of herself with her mother. Meanwhile, the rescue helicopters continued their search and finally located the crash site, deploying 2 scuba divers. The scuba divers spotted the airplane on the edge of a seamount, with the light of the cockpit turned on. They swam closer to inspect. As the group continued searching for items to help them ascend, Rosa asked Ava if she was scared. Ava quickly realized Rosa was anxious and approached her, reassuring her that they would survive. Moments later, the scuba divers approached their location, bringing hope to the group. One of the scuba divers signaled to them, but they saw a shark, pulling the diver down. The group was filled with fear upon seeing the diver's severed leg. The 2 soldiers in the plane left as they ran out of gasoline, believing the scuba divers could handle the situation. Meanwhile, in the airplane, Ava and her companions brainstormed on how they could escape, with Ava thinking of using the scuba tank from one of the deceased divers, so she dove down to the part of the plane that was already submerged in water to search for the body. After resurfacing, Jed asked Ava if she found anything. Ava replied that she wasn't sure, so she tried diving again to check. Upon resurfacing again, she informed Jed that she found something. At the same time, Jed accidentally fell into the water but managed to stay afloat. However, a shark noticed him and started pulling him underwater. Ava and the others tried to rescue Jed, but unfortunately, the shark had severed one of his legs. Jed screamed in pain, and Rosa was guided by Marty to stay behind the curtain and warned not to go near the water. Marty assisted Jed with his severed leg and provided initial first aid. Jed asked Ava about the severity of his injury, and she mentioned that the bleeding had stopped. Jed, confused about not feeling his leg, was informed by Marty that he had lost his leg below the knee. Jed, torn between tears and laughter due to the incident, had his foot covered by Marty while Rosa was ushered in. Danilo stood up, moved the cabinets, and opened the compartment at the back, handing the flashlight to Ava. Ava mentioned that the special language they were looking for was on the right side. Ava entered and dove down searching for the languages when suddenly an octopus appeared in front of her. Ava surfaced holding one language and noticed that there were only 4 masks. Kyle observed that Jed looked pale, prompting her to ask Ava to check on him. Ava talked to Jed, reminding him of his desire to go to Alaska. She assured him that they would go there soon. Jed replied that Ava always says that, but Ava insisted that this time it's for real. Ava then apologized to Jed for leading him into this situation. While talking to Jed, Ava noticed something on the window, and suddenly, they all heard a strange noise prompting them to look out the window together. Marty checked Jed's pulse, apologized to Ava, and Ava wondered why Marty was apologizing. She saw Jed lifeless and attempted CPR while crying, but Danilo stopped her, realizing there was nothing more they could do. As Ava cried, she expressed that Jed wanted to help her, but he died because of her. She mentioned that Jed always tried to be brave, yet she herself couldn't be brave. Marty covered Jed's body with a jacket, and the airplane started making more noise as it continued to break apart. Ava checked what was happening, telling her companions that they needed to leave as soon as possible. Call disagreed, thinking they couldn't do it now as they might become shark food. Ava suggested using the bubbles that Rosa mentioned and the gas canisters for breathing. There were plenty more canisters, and all they needed to do was grab scuba protection. Ava noticed Kyle's distress and asked how he was. Kyle struggled while recounting a traumatic incident when he was taken to a swimming pool by his father. While diving deep, he encountered trouble, and despite holding his breath, his father didn't help. He only managed to surface in time. Rosa asked how long he held his breath, and Kyle said 2 minutes, to which Ava stated that it's enough. Ava continued to gather canisters for more bubbles. Despite suddenly hearing noise, they pressed on with their preparations. Ava spotted sharks through the window but ignored them. She asked Rosa about her dreams, and Rosa expressed her desire to become a vet. In turn, Rosa asked Ava about her plans, and Ava shared that she would return to college in October to finish law school. Kyle questioned their companions about their plan after escaping, and Danilo revealed his intention to marry his partner. He also advised Kyle to choose wisely when it comes to love. Kyle mentioned that he doesn't have any plans except that if he's a lucky guy. Danilo nodded and suggested they leave the area after they prepared. Ava approached the lifeless body of Jed. Suddenly they heard another noise, and the planes started to move. Kyle panicked because they were sliding down. Ava tried to calm him, but Kyle remained anxious. Ava looked out the window and assessed the plane's condition. Kyle asked her what she saw, but Ava claimed she didn't see anything. Kyle, skeptical, checked the window and observed that the plane was beginning to crack. He noticed a can of drink, so he drank it to calm his panic. The plane split in half, but they managed to stay okay. Ava assured them that they could still get home as long as they avoided making rushed movements. Ava took the lead in planning their actions. She suggested sharing the scuba tank until they reached the surface, emphasizing the importance of not hesitating. She looked at Kyle, seeking confirmation if he believed in her plan. After responding, they heard another noise and felt the plane move. Marty pleaded with Ava to take care of her grandchild, saying she would do everything for her grandchild. Ava agreed, and Marty spoke to Rosa, reminding her of their visits to the zoo where her grandfather always stood in front while she was at the back. Marty explained to Rosa that her grandfather continued to watch over her in the form of a spirit. Rosa, with tears in her eyes, agreed, and Marty entrusted Rosa to Ava. Ava instructed Rosa to pull the cord if they spotted a shark, and they wore their goggles before leaving. Marty expressed that she is proud of Rosa. Ava and Rosa dove down, creating bubbles when they encountered a shark, successfully deterring it. Meanwhile, Danilo and Kyle followed suit, but Marty decided to stay on the plane. She whispered to her husband to watch over Rosa before meeting her demise. KK noticed Marty's decision and went back for her, motivating himself with deep breaths. Unfortunately, the shark pulled him away, leaving Danilo with no choice but to leave. Meanwhile, Ava and Rosa continued swimming, discovering the lifeless scuba diver. They took the oxygen tank to breathe and were eventually joined by Danilo. Ava inquired about the others, but she noticed Danilo alone, shaking his head. They exchanged oxygen and detached the tank from the deceased scuba diver, preparing to ascend. When Ava suddenly pulled the cord attached to Rosa and Danilo, allowing them to rise to the surface. Upon reaching the surface, Ava spotted a shark managing to hide. However, the airplane descended, causing Ava to plummet. She struggled to swim upward but eventually lost consciousness. Fortunately, her life jacket brought her to the surface. Upon regaining consciousness, she searched for Rosa and Danilo. She only found Rosa's small teddy bear floating. When helicopters arrived, they threw a rope to Ava, lifted her, and to her relief, she saw Danilo and Rosa. The soldier asked Ava if anyone else was left behind, but Ava shook her head. Rosa mentioned her grandma, but Ava shook her head. Rosa hugged her, shedding tears. Ava gave Rosa the teddy bear, but Rosa mentioned her grandpa's advice that the bear should be with her during tough times. She believed that she no longer needed it, so she decided to return it to the sea.